Hey DJ, how you doing?
Jace, doing good. Good to be back.
Good to hear. Throughout the last couple years, we've spent a lot of time and a good amount of energy integrating AI into our systems and into our business as a whole. And today, I kind of wanted to reflect on some of the experiences that we gained throughout the years and just go back to square one and say, if we could start over, what would we do? So just going back to square one before we really started experimenting and using AI at all in our business. What was that first point for you where you realized this is going to be the next big thing and you realized you needed to start exploring it?
I mean, just the curiosity piece alone had me sucked in. It didn't hit me right away on all the different ways we would end up using it or that we could end up using it early on. It was just a curiosity thing. It was like, wow, this is amazing. What is this? How was it for you?
Yeah, I feel like it was similar kind of approach, mainly because there wasn't any illustration of what was really possible in those early days. There was these very big kind of theories of what was possible, but no one was actually going and doing it, which played into that curiosity because people were talking about how capable it was. When we were first starting out, I think where we struggled, and I think this is common amongst people who are just starting out with AI, was we didn't really have a starting point. We didn't know where it could fit in our business and we didn't know what was possible. And we say it all the time. That is where a lot of people end up. And then they get discouraged because it doesn't feel like they're gaining anything. I really want to dive into what we would do if we were to restart from square one. If today was the first day we heard about AI, with all of the knowledge we've gained over the last couple of years, what would we do to start integrating AI into our business? And I want to start before you even get your hands dirty with AI, because that's something that I know I definitely needed to spend some time on before I went and started experimenting with a bunch of stuff. So let's start at square one, which is understanding what your business is and understanding your systems without AI involved. So in its current state, what do your systems look like? And the importance here is it's really hard to see where AI could fit if you don't even understand the system in its entirety. And even if you're the person who is doing the task or the workflow every single day, a lot of that is kind of hidden within our minds. Like we know what we need to do, but if we needed to articulate it to someone else, that would be a challenge. So I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on how we started systematically going through our business and understanding how things played out and being able to articulate it through workflow mapping and just being able to talk to each other. How do you see that as being an important step in integrating AI?
Yeah, that is the come to Jesus moment, if there ever was one or is one for a company, because it forces you to realize all the areas that you haven't documented, or maybe the systems that you haven't yet created, because they just live in your head. You know how it is when you get really good at something? It's just faster if you do it. And let's say you have a new hire who comes on, you have to slow down and show that person what it is that you do, and you have to think through every single thing that you do in order for that person to be able to produce that thing as good as you do, right? So that's, I think, is a really great way to look at it. Is imagine that you just hired a brand new employee who is wildly talented, possibly a savant, who could actually do your job way better than you, but you have to first show that person the fundamentals, the first principles of what it is that you do, and the reasoning behind why you have step one, two, and three, and why you do things in a certain order.
Mm-hmm.
And think about what I just said for every area of your business. So if you're like an independent operator, let's say you're a one person business or you have a very small company where people do multiple things, and they're really good at those things, it's it's paramount that you stop and like sketch out, even if it's pencil and paper, like all the things that you do, and think through the steps in which you do them, like the jobs to be done. And when you do that, everything starts to become clear, right? And then you start to understand workflow automation at its core is doing just that. It's like listing out every single thing. The best way to look at it is if you just hired a new employee who is a genius, you have to onboard that person. There's got to be a knowledge share. You know, going back uh, to when we first started getting into workflow automation, we had to do that. We were forced to see all the areas that we didn't document what we were doing, and so it was something that we knew we would have to do ultimately, like because what do they tell you? Like you have to document the things that you do. You have to create your playbook so that you can bring people on, so that you can grow. Well, it became super obvious as we started to mess around with automation that that's what we had to do. So going back thinking about it, like that's when it stopped being just a full total bliss playground to okay, it's time to get to work. Like let's go into the workshop now. Let's go see what we can make with this stuff. And that's when it really became real for us.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you make a really good point talking about thinking of it as onboarding a new employee, because that's in essence what you're doing when you're working towards automation is you need to be able to clearly articulate a workflow to AI in order for it to actually do it. So using that first step as kind of organizing your thoughts is super important step of that process, because if you can't properly articulate the step by step of a workflow, the chances of AI being able to complete it aren't going to be high. You have to be the one to teach it. So to kind of illustrate that, I wanted to talk through one of the first systems that we automated, and it's kind of evolved over time, but I think it's a really simple and clear example of this process. And just for context, we're going to be talking about how we communicate with our clients on a weekly basis. So as an agency, we are working throughout the week towards goals, whether it's certain tasks or checkpoints, whatever it may be. And we basically have a weekly stand up with our clients to update them and get any clarifications we need face to face, and let them know where we're headed. And a few years ago, it wasn't, I wouldn't even call it a system. We kind of just did it all our own way. We would, as you can see in this little flow chart, during that weekly call, we would jot down notes, whether it was pen and paper or on just a document. And then after that call, we would have to kind of go through all the notes we took, figure out what is relevant, what needs to be put into Trello or Jira, which are our project management tools. And we spent a lot of time doing that. There was a lot of missing clarity on, what was important and what were just little side notes. And then every day we'd have to go check, our email, check Slack, see if there was any updates in Trello or Jira, and we'd have to make adjustments that way. And then coming up on the next week's call, we would have to basically take all of that scattered information and try to communicate what was done to the client. So it was doable before a system, and we did it for a long time. It wasn't structured, which makes it difficult to repeat. It served its purpose at the time. We were able to update our clients weekly, but there were oftentimes things slip through the cracks, or, a client would bring something back up that I'd be like, oh shoot, I wrote that down and I totally forgot to take note of it in, Trello or Jira. So I think the first step that we realized was if you don't have a system for a workflow, that's step number one. You got to build a system around it, which is basically just, it needs to be something that's repeatable and very clearly defined. Once we created the system around it, this is what the system looked like. So it has a lot of the same pieces, but it's a little more intentional and a little more explicitly defined. So the big shift was we created what we call the weekly client meeting document. Every week, we're going to let them know what we accomplished last week, what we're currently working on, and what we expect to finish by next week. So that makes it super easy to communicate to the client where we're at and where we're headed without it being a bunch of notes scattered throughout our desk and in our Google Drive. Have you, DJ, noticed a difference just before we even touched AI, moving from not having a system to building that system? And was there a difference that you noticed within our weekly meeting calls?
Yeah, for sure. prior to us putting all these systems in place, it kind of just felt like this endless daisy chain from one meeting to the next of, okay, in the last meeting we talked about X, Y, and Z. So for this meeting coming up, we got to address X, Y, and Z. And then that meeting would come, right? And we would address those things. And then we would have another list of things that we would then move on. But let's say that in the XYZ thing, Y wasn't completely finished. We would have to keep track of Y on top of the new bullet points that we came out of that meeting with. And over time, that sounds very simple, but over time, that gets really, really messy, especially when Y and Z and X start lagging behind the things that you're currently working on. Now you have multiple things in parallel. With a system in place now, like we have now, all those things are easily tracked and we don't miss a step. So, for instance, going into a meeting, we are taking a look at what happened in the last meeting plus what we're working on now, and that just goes into a brief. That used to take a long time to produce before a meeting, and now we have that like within seconds sometimes, and we're able to just kind of curate that going into the meeting, and also then coming out of the meeting, we have notes that come out that just automatically get compiled into it. So it's automated that side of things for us, which eliminated so much human error that could take place, just through the course of a day or over a week or a 2-week sprint or something. It really made it everything black and white for us on paper for where we were going, where we had already been, and what we had to focus on right now, and what we could not focus on. Like, in other words, like things that we decide this is not an A priority for this week. I know it came up in the meeting. It's come up in the meeting twice, but it's still not an A priority yet. We can call it that, call it a B priority, and keep it on the sheet, and kind of run multiple sprints in parallel. It's become very easy to do that. It's not a there's no mental gymnastics at all anymore. It's literally just document the meeting, compile it, and curate for the next meeting. It's been a game changer for us on the project management front. On the product development side, actually in the dev room, it's made things very easy to understand priorities. When you're in a constant state of development, in continuous development and iteration, sometimes it's easy to lose track of features that you're working on, why they even matter. As you start to see it play out over the long run, you start to see how different features actually work together in an evolving way, like through the process of evolution, through iteration, you start to see what things actually mattered and which things didn't matter. So that's within the dev room, that's within the shop, but then also on the project management front, keeping the client's expectations clear. That is an art form. And what this did is it actually turned it into a system that we could operate with ease. So we have so much more mental capacity to do things beyond what normally we would be able to do. What's your thoughts on how it's changed things for you?
Yeah, I think at least personally, I spent a lot less time before meetings having to go 2 or 3 weeks back to see if I missed anything, because that weekly like checkpoint with a structured document makes it super easy to see what I promised last week, where we're at, where we're headed. And then another thing that I didn't really think about when we first created it was over the span of months, it's a lot easier to see progress. Because previously, like we would move tickets around in Trello and it's like, okay, I can see all these tickets here, but I don't have any frame of reference for, how much was completed in X amount of time. So having that weekly checkpoint where it's clearly documented has made it really easy to see progress over time. And it's also allowed us to course correct if we need to. Like if it's been 2 or 3 weeks and we're not making progress like we think we should, it gives us that opportunity to kind of take a step back and be like, okay, what is happening that's causing this? And I think that has been super helpful on both the client side and the development side. Um, I kind of want to talk about the other portion of understanding our business at a larger scale, which is that is an example of a single workflow. But at the same time that we were creating those systems, we were looking at a larger scale at our business as a whole. So I kind of wanted to talk about the different areas that we really looked at to figure out and document our systems. And I think this made it really clear to us, first of all, where we were having bottlenecks, because when it wasn't written down, I could tell you what took the most amount of time out of my week, but it was hard to articulate it clearly. So breaking our business down into, we use these 5 different areas because those are what's applicable to us, but you know, maybe your business doesn't have some of these, or maybe it has some extra areas. The point is being able to group your systems into these different business areas has made it really helpful to figure out where we're having bottlenecks and where we're struggling. So I wanted to talk to you about how taking that step back and looking at our business as a whole, how that allowed us to find those areas where we were struggling and be able to kind of pinpoint them.
Yeah, when you when you're running a race, you don't always pay attention to all the runners in the race, right? You don't. Let's use like the relay race analogy. So there's 4 people in a relay race. Everybody's focused on themselves, right? And when you're focused on your leg of the race, that's great. But if you don't see what the rest of the people are doing, you might miss the baton, right? You might just be running your heart out. And if you go and drop that baton, then you're completely disqualified. So in this sense, if we're just focusing on operations and that's all we focus on, we're not paying attention to the things happening in sales and marketing, like we're losing ground, for instance, in sales and marketing, then we don't have new business coming in, we don't have new customers, we don't have new clients. We're just completely focused on building things. That's all we do. Then we miss that handoff. We miss those signs, those early signs that something is not going right in a certain department. What this has enabled us to do is really to step back on a daily basis and really just keep an eye on things. It sounds silly to say that, but trust me, when you're running multiple races at one time and you're trying to keep things all moving forward, it's very difficult to see bottlenecks before they happen. You're seeing them as they happen. Now, like I said, we're seeing issues before they become issues. Like we're self-correcting at a much faster pace because we can see things happening within the company through the various tools that we now have in place. And we have extra time on our hands to do that too. So that's a big part of it.
Definitely. I agree. Moving into our next point, I like to approach this one with caution, mainly because I think people get a little carried away learning about tools. And I think that's something that we struggled with when we first started was there's so many different AI tools out there that you really want to like dive in and figure out all the intricacies of every little tool. There's a time and a place for that. I think we would definitely try to avoid that. That's something that we spent a good amount of time on where, week to week we'd be like, "Oh, this is the tool for us." Like if we could figure out this one tool, all of our problems will be solved. On that same note, you do need to have like a general understanding of what's available and what each tool can do. You don't need to know every little intricacy of it, but there is value in understanding how these different tools can play into your systems. So, if we were able to go back, I think, at least personally, I would spend some time just looking at AI as a whole and seeing kind of what's available at a very high level, not specific, and just have a general understanding of what each of those tools is capable of doing. Just because if you don't know what's possible, it's going to be really hard for you to visualize AI fitting into your systems. And it's definitely a line you have to balance on. You don't want to spend too much time going deep into a tool and then you realize, oh, this isn't anything I can use anyways. And now you just wasted all this time. But you do need to have that general understanding. We were lucky enough to kind of find that balance within the Claude ecosystem just because they have a lot of different tools that can seem similar, but they all have these little slight differences. And I think our ability to understand those has helped us immensely in seeing where we can use these tools within our systems. Just for some examples, like knowing the difference between a project and a skill, even though on surface level it can be those two things can be easily confused as fulfilling the same need. just having a general understanding of where they can each fit has been super helpful in us being able to integrate them into our systems. Do you have any thoughts on how to kind of balance those two things? Not diving too deep into a tool, but still having a general understanding of how it works.
It's important to know what tools are available to you. Once you do understand what kind of tools that are out there and how they apply to what you do, if that tool can make you 10 times faster, well, then you're 10 times faster. You don't have to go 10 hours deep into the tool to know that it solves a problem for you. You just have to take a brief look at it. So you have to dedicate time to keeping up with what tools are coming available on a monthly basis. You don't have to do this every day, but make it a point to spend 1 hour a month just investigating tools and looking at the ones that are becoming popular in your industry, right? You don't want to be that guy that's swinging a hammer when everybody else next to you's got a nail gun. I mean, just pay attention to what's happening in your industry. But really, why I think we love Claude so much is it's really become our home base, so that no matter what new tool comes out, we're good. We're solid. MCP exists. Claude invented it. That means that you can basically plug in any external tool to work with Claude. Game changer. But even let's take another step back real quick, because I just want to also shed a little bit more light on the systems thing. You may be coming across tools that you may think will do a good job for you and your company, but if you don't have the systems in place to even use it, then kind of what's the point of the tool, right? Talking about systems, we're not talking about inventing new ways of doing things that you already do. We're just talking about you documenting the things that you do on a daily basis. So like earlier when you said we didn't have these systems in place, well, we actually had the processes in place, but they weren't documented technically as systems. We were just doing the things, right? So once you finally document those things and you can clear them, you can see them clearly in front of you, then from the moment that you see a tool, you can immediately tell if it's going to be of value to you or not, because you see the whole system in front of you of where it could bring value. So keep pace with the tools that are coming out. And yes, it's annoying because they keep coming out. And yes, it's exhausting because they keep coming out. But those things, as they come out, are going to save you so much time. They're going to make you so much more productive. Testing out new tools is a fun thing if you let it be, but only after you have your core systems kind of documented and know how you do what you do, to know how to leverage that new tool when it comes out.
I think you make a good point. And something that might be overlooked is like, even if you are using a set of tools, every once in a while, kind of reflect and make sure that you're using the right tool, because AI is moving at such a fast pace that something might have come out that is a better fit for that system. But if you're not looking and if you're not reflecting on the tools you're currently using, you're never going to find it. I mean, in your little analogy, at some point before there were nail guns, it was, a hammer and a nail. And if someone never went to Home Depot or Lowe's to see, oh, now they have these things where you just have to like boom, boom, then they're still going to be stuck doing the nail and hammer when they could be saving a bunch of time.
How do you approach keeping pace with the onslaught of tools that just never ends? Like, what's your thought process? How do you look at new tools?
I try not to get caught up in new tools. And I am kind of in a unique position where that's a lot of my job is being up to date on the latest AI stuff. But I think a good place to start is being within an ecosystem. So for us, it's the Anthropic ecosystem. It's a lot easier to keep up if you're just focused on what Anthropic is releasing. And then if you hear about some other tool, you can go check it out. But for like a base understanding of what's available to you, being within a large language model ecosystem is super helpful, because realistically, 90% of the integrations that we've done with AI have been within that ecosystem. We use skills, we use scheduled tasks, we use cowork, and they release at a pace where it's not that difficult for me to keep up with what's available. And then outside of that, being connected in ways where you can see what other people around you are doing is a really good way to continue to learn tools or at least learn what's available, um, which is kind of the basis for Claude School. Not to throw a pitch in there, but like if you can see what other people are using, it's a lot easier to understand where it could fit in your business as opposed to seeing an ad for a new product because they're selling you on the product. They're going to make it sound like this great thing. But if you have community around you in similar industries and they're also integrating with AI, that's probably the number one resource you should use because they're experimenting just as you are and they'll be able to give you feedback. Those are some options to kind of stay up to date is look at the people around you, look at your competitors, or just focusing on one area or one ecosystem and using that as your base, like your home base. And then if you do see something that interests you, it doesn't hurt to go look at what's possible. Just don't get too caught up in it and don't spend too much time going down these caves where it might not end up being as useful as you think it is.
I just want to add one more point on the point, which is there will come a time when you stop looking at the next tool because once you have your workflows mapped out and once you have automations in place and once you're using a few tools that already kind of do the things that you need it to do, I mean, they could come out with version 2, version 3, version 4, and it's not really going to be that huge of a deal for to take you off task to continue just looking at new tools, but you know, every now and then something big will rock the industry, and just having your ear to the street to see what those things are, that's kind of and like you said, you don't have to think too much deeper than that, but you know, first and foremost, the number one tool you need is a platform like Claude to call your AI hub, that thing
Mhm.
that is basically going to connect to all the other tools as they come out. I'm not a dog chasing cars, I'm really just kind of like watching the big players do what they do. And if it is something that we can really tap into and bolt onto an existing system that will help us tremendously, great. If it's not going to move the needle all that much, then so be it, and kind of just like keep an eye until the big things start to come out and change the industry.
Yeah, I like that. Moving into the next point, which you briefly discussed, and it's kind of connected to learning available tools, and something that we didn't necessarily explicitly state, but we definitely do, is just experimenting with tools at a small scale as a way to learn what that tool is capable of and see to what extent we can integrate it into our systems. For the majority of AI tools, you're going to have some type of access for free. And that is a really great way to figure out what that tool is capable of. And you can experiment by looking at your systems. You can say, I know this is something I do on a daily basis. Is this something that tool X is capable of? Um, so to kind of jump back into the example, here are some ways that I experimented within this particular workflow. And doing it this way has enabled me to basically piece together little chunks of the workflow until I had this relatively smooth automated task. When I got to the end of it, I was like, wow, I can't believe how far I've come from manually writing notes down every week. So I just wanted to talk through some examples of how you can experiment with AI. A big one, which we always talk about, instead of taking notes every call, we implemented AI note takers business wide. And that's made a huge difference. We've talked about it before and we will probably continue to talk about it. In any scenario where you are having calls, having an AI note taker is like, I don't know if I'd go so far as life changing, but it's pretty dang close. It's up there. Just the ability to remove the mental load of having to take notes and knowing for a fact that you're going to have all that information there was amazing. And it's something that didn't take a lot of effort. You create an account, you hook it up to your calendar so it knows when your calls are, and then it just joins. And then you get a summary at the end. Before we, fully started automating this entire workflow, can you kind of talk to me a little bit about how you experimented with AI note takers and how did setting one up kind of open your eyes to what was possible?
Yeah, for me, it was the output. When I saw the very first output, when it just gave me all the notes from the meeting and organized them and highlighted them in ways that I probably I would have done that on by my own as well, like in the same way, was awesome. It was like having somebody in the room with you taking notes who's been taking notes for you for years, who knows how you like to organize things. To me, that was the moment, where I
Yeah.
thought, okay, this is a no-brainer. I'm telling everybody about this thing.
Yeah. And I think there was, at least personally, a few weeks where I used the AI note taker in parallel with taking notes because I wasn't sure what it was capable of. And that's kind of the point of this is use it within the context of your system. Don't lean on it, don't rely on it at first, but see what it's capable of. And we realized super quick that AI note takers are plenty capable of capturing all the information within a call. So that was really the first thing we experimented with within this workflow. And being able to see what the output looked like just very gently led us to the next point, which was what do we do with this information that the AI note taker gives us? And previously, we would take our notes and we'd have to differentiate what goes where, what's relevant. Does it go in Trello? Does it go in Jira? Is it just something I need to put on my to do list? So once we realized that an AI note taker could capture all those points, we then went and said, okay, let's take this output and it gives you those items. It gives you the to-do list items. And then I at least use Claude with the output of the AI note taker to help me draft the actual contents of any tickets I would have to make in Trello or Jira. So that was kind of the next step for us. And very quickly we saw, oh, it can do that with ease. It's pulling the relevant information. It is doing a good job of explaining what needs to go in tickets and whether it needs to go to the client side or the development side. So once we experimented with that, we then moved on to kind of the next iteration, which was okay, instead of just drafting tickets, let's set up connectors so Claude can directly access Jira and Trello. So now, instead of just drafting it, it can draft it. And then once we okay it, it can create those tickets. So removing more work from us. And then kind of moving on to our daily practice of keeping up to date with our projects. I now have a scheduled task every morning that goes into all of our systems, checks for any new emails, checks for any Slack messages that I missed, and then uses those to let me know what needs to change in our other systems like Trello or Jira or anything that I need to do that day. So, as you can see, these are little pieces of the puzzle, and we're just moving along, and you can see how they start to fit together, which we'll talk about after this. And then the one that we were really excited about was that right before the call, where previously we had to spend a bunch of time going back, finding all the information, collecting it, summarizing it into the points that I talked about before, what we accomplished, what we're working on, what we expect to finish by next week. That previously took a decent amount of time because it's a good amount of information. It's a week's worth of working on stuff and, little iterations to small tasks. So the next thing we experimented with was, is Claude able to collect all that information? So we set up connectors with all of our systems and we basically just asked it, can you go back, check everything from the past week and let me know within the frame of what we accomplished, what we're working on, and what we expect to finish next week, can you come up with those points? And we saw that it was capable of doing that. And if it wasn't, that's the point where you make that realization and maybe it's time to move on to a different tool. So that's where experimenting can become super useful as it gives you that little taste of, okay, I think either it does it perfectly the first time, or maybe we need to give it a little more information for it to be able to complete that task, or it's not giving the output I like after a bunch of iterations, and maybe that tool isn't the right fit for right now. So that's really the value of experimenting is you are just slowly chipping away at the problem instead of trying to do it all in one go, and then you can very easily get overwhelmed. And I mean, as you can see, we iterate on a lot of our experiments. Before we set up all the connectors, we would basically have Claude walk us through how to create our weekly meeting sheet. So it would ask us what we accomplished within the week, what we're working on, and what's next. And then the next iteration on that was connecting or adding connectors in Claude to allow it to grab that information for itself. And then the final piece was taking all that information that we discussed with Claude, putting it into a structured document that looks the same every week, and having it store it in a Google Drive folder that is specific to each project. So that's a lot of different examples, but as you can see, we worked our way through that workflow in little chunks, and we could see how everything could connect together. And that is really the purpose of experimenting. We didn't try to go from step 1 to step 5 all in one go, because that's a lot more difficult. It takes a lot more time, and often AI won't be able to handle that large of a task. But when you break it down into those smaller pieces, it starts to really quickly become clear what Claude or what AI is capable of. Do you have any specific things that you think about when experimenting? Is there like a threshold for you where you say, this is something we should integrate or this is something we shouldn't?
I'm open-minded like across the board about things that AI could do. Because again, this is going back to the infancy of it. It's just a curiosity thing for me. So I'm always kind of open to seeing how other people are using it. My approach to implementing AI, though, there's a big difference between experimenting and implementing it, like actually
Yeah.
doing something with it that could change the way that you do something to make what you do a lot either better or faster or both, is think about AI as an admin assistant. Let's just kind of start there as a baseline of in workflow automation, if you could have somebody do something for you, what would that thing be? Like whatever it is that you do, you're hired to do a specific thing or things. But then as the day goes on, you're doing more things because you have to do the things to keep up with the main thing that you do, right? So instead of doing just the one thing that you're really good at, you're doing the 4 other admin things that you have to do because there's nobody else around you to do them. So you're kind of like a do-it-all person, right? In some respects, we all are. We all have to do multiple things in addition to that one thing that we're really good at. That's fine. Nobody's special in that regard. However, if you can figure out how to use AI, even at a small scale, like what you're saying here, using an AI note taker, that's not rocket science per se, but what you do with the information that comes out of that meeting becomes the game changer once you figure out how to stitch these things together into automation. If you look at AI as an admin assistant in the beginning, then I think you start to see, oh, wait, all I have to do is turn my note taker on. I can create some sort of automation that will take my notes and turn it into something that I need to do with those notes. And then on it goes. That's kind of how I look at it. So if there's a job that we do daily or regularly, I'm constantly thinking about, okay, well, would this thing that we're using to do this other task, would it also use in this kind of capacity or this role? If not, then what is something new that we can experiment with to automate this next thing? So like you said, start with one thing. I said things a lot there, but that's really what we're getting to the point of is, and the reason why we call them things is because we don't enjoy doing them, right? They're just the things that we have to do to get to the thing that we enjoy doing. Look at it in the sense of, I'm going to do this small scale automation that's going to take my notes and it's going to create the report that I have to have ready that would normally take me hours to produce. I'm going to do that this first time manually, but then I'm going to figure out how I can do it by the push of a button or by a prompt so that it'll almost run on its own. And then one day it'll run on its own. And then the more of these things that you stitch together, the more amazing it becomes, because then you can step back and realize, how did I even get through life without all of these automations? Yeah, that for me, that's how I approach it, is focusing on one little thing, typically that I don't like to do, but have to do. And I go, okay, if I could eliminate that, how could I do that? And then the takeaway is, wow, I just eliminated that thing. And now I can move on to the next thing that I really like to do. So how do you approach it?
I've been a similar way. I basically, any workflow that I do, I try to break down into the simplest piece I could. So every time there's a task, if I can break it down into two smaller tasks, I will do that. And then once I get to that very simple chunk, that's what I use to experiment with AI. Because if I can validate it in its simplest form, I can then start to kind of link them together and start to kind of group them together, and then over time that turns into an entire workflow. So that's always my recommendation when experimenting is try to break it down into its smallest piece. If AI could do it in that smallest form, it's a lot more likely that you can string those together and automate an entire workflow, which I'll kind of use that as our transition into our final point, which is building AI into our systems. So once you've validated that it's possible to do something with AI, it's then time to string them all together and fit them into your system that you have. So I kind of walked you through how we went from something that we did weekly into a documented system. And then from that documented system, we picked the smaller pieces out and started experimenting with AI. And now that we know it's possible with AI, the final piece is to integrate with AI. So here's how we did it in this workflow. And I kind of walked you through with experiments, with the experiments that we did, but here's the kind of connection between them all. So during a call, we use an AI note taker that removes the need for physical notes. Then when I go into Claude, all I have to do is call a skill and let it know which meeting I want it to look at. And it can help me create the necessary tickets and adds items to my to-do list to complete for that week. And then every day I have a scheduled cowork task where it will check all of the systems and make updates to tickets and the to-do list. And then before the call, I can use another Claude skill to pull the relevant updates and basically have a conversation with it to polish the client meeting document structure. And then I have another skill that creates that document and stores it in the drive. So we went from a lot of hands-on tasks to basically giving Claude most of that work. So realistically, the actual interaction I have with this workflow now is right here. I just basically have to tell it to go look at that meeting, which I could probably automate, but our meetings change around. So I try to keep it manual for me so I can do it on my own time. This triggers on its own. And then this portion together, which used to take 45 minutes to an hour before a call, if not more, is now a 10-minute conversation with Claude. So over the span of a week, we have numerous calls with clients. That's saving me 45 minutes multiple times a week. That is the goal, right? We're trying to get rid of this stuff that we don't want to do. If we could go back and start from square one, I think we would follow these steps. Start with, understanding our business, being able to explicitly write down all of our systems and how they work. Then being aware of what tooling is available and experimenting with that tooling at small scale. And finally, building those experiments into our full AI systems. Do you have any closing thoughts on that?
I loved kind of going down memory lane because I had so many good memories of stumbling onto these things as we found them. And I wish somebody would have said, here's the one sheet on how we basically automated all of our admin tasks away. But back then nobody had that one sheet, right? We were all just kind of figuring out as we went. And so this is that one sheet for you. If you're new, if you're curious, if you're just getting started with AI, take this as just a very simple framework for you to get started with your company using AI. And that's what we're doing within Claude School, so that you can get up to speed a lot faster than it took us back when we got started with it. So And also seeing how other people approach this and seeing how they do things differently is what will give you the creativity to really make it for you, to really create systems or automations and use tools in ways that are unique to you. Don't get caught up in mimicking what you see online. It's made for that person, right? For their system. And don't just go copy what other people are doing. Use it as a framework for synthesis into what you do and how you already work, and learn from other people and invite other people in who aren't using AI, because you get a lot better at it when you explain it to other people. And this process, what you're showing right here, is a phenomenal starting point for everybody and anybody at a company of any size to get started with it. It just takes a cloud subscription and time to experiment. Now's the time to do it.
Yeah, it was great to go over all those points. Hopefully, it adds some value and helps some people along their journey to integrate AI. If you are looking for more guidance or the shortcuts on some of these steps, Claude School is definitely the place to start. We have built it to try to help people more quickly integrate AI into their business and understand what's possible through courses to help you understand the tooling, through our cohort to walk you through understanding your business and getting those workflow maps created, and then obviously the community to reflect and talk to other people about what they're doing in their business. Thank you so much for your time, DJ.
Thank you, Jace. This is awesome. I can't wait to go a little bit deeper on each one of these in the future. This is awesome.
Absolutely.